Hello and welcome to another tutorial. So this time around we are going to be continuing to extend the RTS series, our real-time strategy game series. And what we're going to do is we're going to focus on setting up some of the user interface for being able to build the different items, things like that we've set up. So we're not going to look at the placing side of them. That's an area in and of itself. But we're going to focus on the UI, and in particular looking at a Command and Conquer style one as the main one where I've seen this, where we actually have a set of tabs of the different types of things that we can build. So let's dive on in. So first thing I want to do is I want to start blocking out the UI. Now I'm going to currently still be using the old UI system. I'm not switching over to UI Toolkit yet. There's a few things that it doesn't do that make it a bit of a deal breaker for me. It is one that I do want to eventually be able to hopefully switch over to, but at the moment it's not quite where I need it to be for fully using it. So I want to start blocking this out. So with UI, my process is always block things out and sort of starting with panels as the basis. So, okay, I'm going to have, I'm going to call this right side, and then I'm going to obviously adjust my settings here for this. So we adjust our pivot. Makes it a little bit easier for configuring this. Now the canvas, I generally use, so overlay works well. I usually will go for scale with screen size, and I generally design for 1920 by 1080. That's what I find works well. So then width-wise here, probably let's go for 400. What's the GeForce display disappears? So yeah, about 400, maybe 350. We'll go for that. So, okay, we've got the right side one there. And then I'm going to set up a panel within that. And while I won't set it up yet, I will have a mini map at the top. And I will also then have our build panel. So the mini map at the top, what I'm going to do is set up a layout element for that, where I'm going to set the preferred height to be, so if the width here is 350, I'll probably have a buffer of like 5 around that. So I think something like 340 for the preferred height. And then with this, I'm going to add in a vertical layout group just to organize things, set my pattern, and set the spacing between things. And then initially, if I go with this, so one of the things that do often run into with the UI ones is getting the right mix of settings here. So we've got our mini map looking good. Build panel, can add a layout element to it, make it have a flexible height. So now it's fully expanded. So then I'm just going to adjust some of the tinting here so it stands out a little bit clearer and just is generally going to blend in nicer. So that's good. So our build panel is where we can start setting up things. So how I want this to work is I want a row of buttons to select the particular type of thing to build. And then I want a grid essentially under that that gets filled in with the icons of the different things to build. So if I set up that, then I'll have another panel, and this will be the category panel, I think would be the appropriate term. And then this, the other one that I'll create, again, another panel, will be our buildable item panel. So we'll just block these out. We'll use a similar process to what we did before. Layout element with a preferred height. And we might say, I feel like 100 might be right. Maybe that's a bit too much. Might actually go for 50. This one will make it another layout element and flexible height. And we can do, again, the same thing with a vertical layout group. So we end up using quite a lot of the vertical layout groups. And we'll turn off the force expansion. So that's good. I don't initially worry too much about the tinting, except for potentially tinting things to a darker color to make it a little bit easier to see. So far, that looks pretty good. Then in my category panel, well, I want to have different buttons that'll appear in here. And I want to make sure that I'm using the Text Mesh Pro button. So we'll have a bunch of these, and I'm just going to initially create enough, and then add in a grid layout group for this. And the size, well, we want to keep the same sort of size as this. So I'm going to say the cell size, the height can be 40. And I think the width should be more like 75 or even lower. I want to get a width where it'll actually fit sort of nicely and have a bit of padding on the left and right. I think top and bottom were good, but I'll put in the bit of padding there anyway. The alignment, middle center. So that looks pretty good. We know that will fit the different buttons there nicely. So what I'll end up doing is, this will be UI category picker button, or just UI category picker, I think is fine. I'm going to have a whole bunch of scripts I need to start setting up. So I'm going to create a folder here for our UI. I'm not going to worry about the content of the scripts just yet. Initially, I just want to be getting the individual ones set up. So we'll have UI, and we'll call it category picker, same as we're doing for the other ones. I will have a script that is for the build panel. And I'm going to call this specifically build panel tabbed. The reason being is that I will also have a non-tabbed one that I want to set up in future. And because there's likely going to be common code, this will just make it a bit easier for working with. So set those up. Not really sure yet what sort of data I want to have on this, but it's going to, I've at least got the button there set up and ready to go. The buildable item one, I'm going to do a similar thing where I add in a Text Mesh Pro button, and I want to set up a similar thing with a grid layout group. And initially, just going to create a whole load of buttons because I just want to get the layout looking nicely. So I think with this, in terms of the layout, want to experiment and see, okay, what size looks best. So I think 100 is fine. With 100, I could have a little bit more of a spacing between these. And I could align these upper center like that. And that looks pretty good. Like, I'm happy with how that looks. So this would be UI buildable item picker. And I'll do the same thing of setting up a C# script, UI buildable item picker, and I will add the script onto that as well. So I can start to set up a few things that I need for these. So let's load up all of these scripts. So, okay, our category picker is going to need to know what category it's showing. So we've got that information. If we go to our different sort of ones here, our buildable base, we've got this type. So that's what I want to use here. So I want to have the category picker is going to have a public SO buildable object base, eType, category type. We'll do the getter with the private setter, and we'll default it to not set. There is a specific reason why I'm going to be doing that, because there's a few different things I want to do with this. I'm also going to bring in Text Mesh Pro, because what I want to have here is, as well as that, I'll actually put this above it, a serialized field. Text Mesh Pro UGUI is the one that I want. And this is going to be category label. So that looks good. I need any of those functions. What I want to then have is a public void on category picker, or on category picked. Now this is probably going to need to send an event elsewhere as well. So what I might do is change this to on button selected, because this could be something running on mobile, so it's not a click, it's a tap. And I will set up an ability for it to pass that on to something else. So I'm going to bring in Unity engine.events, and I will have, and this is a rare case where I will actually make this fully public, because I want this to be something I can access in the inspector and also potentially something I could access in code. So I want to be able to support both. So we'll have SO buildable object base and our type, and this will be on category selected. And then what I'll do here is on category selected invoke. I'll also set up a public void bind where we provide the category type. And what that will do is that will, apart from setting it, which I'm actually going to change this to an in naming like that. This will run it with category type. And then here, I just want to go category label dot text is we convert it to a string. So that's all I want for a category picker. Fairly straightforward setup where all it's doing is it's just relaying that click, and it's also being able to just set up the text and everything there. So setting up so that it's easy for us working with in code. The item picker is actually going to be fairly similar. I want Text Mesh Pro and the event stuff in there as well. I'm going to this following largely the same setup here. So it's going to have almost identical ones. Close enough that I would actually, to save time, start with this as the basis. So not into the build panel tab, this is actually into our item picker. and move those over. So, okay, rather than category label, it's item label. We'd have on item selected, and this would be a buildable object base. So item SO, and that's going to just be null to start. We bind it to that. So in item SO, so item SO like that. Just get the little bits we need here. Item label. Now our scriptable object actually can tell us this. So we have item SO and our name. Now we also have support for our UI image. So what I'm going to be able to do is I will also set up here our Unity Engine UI image, and we will refer to this as our item image. Because then here I can go, hey, item image sprite is item SO, oops, not that, item SO UI image. The on button selected will end up sending our on item selected event and the item SO. So far so good. We've got some of the basics happening there. So if we go back to Unity, we can start to set up these for our prefabs then. So what I would be doing is our category picker. Well, on click, I want this to run the function that we set up here, the on button selected. That's all I want that to do. And I want to link up the text label here, like that. So that is then good to prefab. Now this text, what I will do is I'll probably drop the font size and also turn on auto sizing. We might need to allow a little bit more of a margin there if we're doing that. So that's something where with this, what I could do is add in a small margin. It's generally on the left and the right that you need a little bit of a margin with the text. So that's good. That one I can prefab. And what I'll do is I will set up folder prefabs. So our category picker is good to go. Our buildable item picker, we're going to do a fairly similar thing where the on click, it's not a category picker on that one. It actually needs to be the item picker. Script there, so okay, we link that up. Same on button selected. We also do the same stuff for linking up the text. We're going to add in a UI image. Now, the reason I want to do this as a separate image is so that if there's any extra effects, things like that I want to do on this, that I can easily do that. So item image, and what I will do with the text is actually want the text down the bottom. Actually, no, up the top might look better. And we'll anchor that. So we've got 0, 0, and we position this so it's oriented at the top, and the height is 50. So that looks good. We can again do the auto sizing and give it a little bit of that margin. So that's good. Our item image is there. That looks all good. And what I'll do is initially link that up to a sprite that I've already set up, which I've got that here. The reason I do that is because that just gives me a few of these extra options here, which makes it a little bit easier for setting this up. And it can take up the full size. That image, I've made it square intentionally, so that looks good. We'll link up our item image so that can be modified, and then that is also good to prefab. So once I've done those, I can actually delete them because I don't really need them anymore. What I'm doing then is I'm setting up for the build panel. It's going to know about those prefabs. So build panel tab, it's going to have game object, UI category prefab. Going to have a similar thing for, actually I can just call it category prefab. And then we'll have item. And I might put the UI part there. So category UI prefab, item UI prefab. I need to know where to be spawning these. So I want a rect transform. Actually, just a transform will do. So we'll have category UI root. And we'll have a transform for item UI root. So that's good. I'll have functions here for on category selected, and that will have our SO buildable object base type category type, like that. I'll have a similar one for the item. So I'll have on buildable item selected in buildable item. I can start to be connecting up the different bits and pieces. This is going to link to a builder. So I want to also have a link to a particular builder. So we have our builder base, linked builder. And that means we're in a good position now for starting to connect up a few of these links. So, okay, in start, I need to populate the UI. So I need to refresh the UI. When we select a category, we'll refresh the UI as well. And that means one of the things I want to do is I actually want to keep track of what the selected category is. So selected category. And I could default this to a particular one. In this case, I'm going to default it to building. But I could have it that it's not defaulted to anything. Here, I would go and say that. Now I can start to set up our refresh UI. So the goal of refresh UI is to populate that set of items that can be built. So what I would be first doing is removing every child under that item UI root. So the way I would normally approach doing that is we loop through child index is equal to our item UI root, child count -1, and exactly like that. Then the child game object, we get the child, we access its game object, we do a destroy of it, so that will clean out any existing UI. That cleans out the existing UI. Spawn the new UI. Well, what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to ask the builder, okay, what are the buildable items for this particular category? So this is where we can get the linked builder. And what I want to do is I want to check on the actual builder itself. So if I go to the builder, let's see what stuff we've already got. We've got the build data in progress. So, okay, when it's here, it does build up this buildables of type. Those get added in, and the available buildables get populated. So we do have this dictionary that has that information in it. We don't have access to that external to this, but this is something that we could do. So what I could do, there's a couple of different ways I could go about doing this. One option would be I could set up a public, and this would be a list of SO buildable object base, and this would actually be a function, so I'll move it further down. Get buildable items for type. We provide the type here, and what I do is let's have this list here for this out list, which I will set to null to begin with. And then I'll be returning that. And I want to do a F, and we can say our available buildables, and we can do a try get value out into that list of the type. If it's successful, it can return that. Actually, we don't even need the if, it can just do that. So it's not going to, we don't need to do the contains, just keeps things a little bit cleaner. So that's good. I'll move this down here like that. So that's a handy little function that we've got available. So what would happen is I would go, I've got linked builders, and we have our get buildable items for type for that category. So this is a good use for where var, so we're not having to write out the long set of stuff. So available buildables. If available buildables is null, then I'm just going to return. There's nothing further to do. So we're getting the available ones. And then for each one, spawn the UI. So for each, that looks good. And what I would do is I've got my item UI prefab. So do game object instantiate item UI prefab. We have our item UI root, and that looks good. So this is our spawned, well, our item UI. Now I want to configure that. So I could have a var item UI logic is we do an item UI get component, and I'm going to retrieve that. So I've got the particular one there, and I want to be able to then go bind. So item UI logic bind, and we give it the available buildable. I'm going to hook up the event as well. So this is why I had the on item selected exposed, so that what I can then do is add listener, and we have our onBuildableItem selected function. So onBuildableItem selected. So now whenever we select a category, it should just select the particular one. Now, our category UI we haven't generated yet, so we want to actually generate that too. So what I would do is check, do we need to spawn the category UI? This just makes it easier if we add further categories in future. So if category UI root child count is 0, then I will spawn it. So what I would do is, we've got our available categories here, and what we can do is we can actually go a system.enum get values, and we can give that, and so what we do is we go type of, and we say so buildable object base eType. So this is our enum values, like that. And what I would actually call this is maybe raw category types. So var raw category type. And there's a very specific reason for that, and the reason is this. I need to actually do a cast here, because this is a fairly generic function. It's providing stuff back in a type where we do actually need to do casting for it, and we need to explicitly do that. So we've got this of raw category type like that. I will skip none, or not set, and otherwise what we will do is very similar to this, where we'll have category UI is our game object instantiate, and we give it our category UI prefab. We put it in category UI root. So this whole setup, while it's a bit involved, it's going to mean that in future, if we add a new category, this just works. We might need to resize things, change stuff like that. We could also swap in having icons for the different categories, but it means it's very simple going forward. So we have a similar one of category UI logic, and we do our category UI get component, and we have our category picker. We'll do the same binding setup, so category UI logic bind category. Actually, it should just be bind that. And we also hook up our event. So category UI logic on category selected, add listener, like that. So that's pretty much should mean this UI is largely functional. Now when we select a buildable item here, I'm going to actually just go, well, build linked builder dot request to queue build in buildable item. So I've got a little bit of things that I need to hook up here for our build panel. I'm going to need to tell it what builder it is linked to. I need to link it to our different prefabs and the transforms. So let's first link up the category and item UI root. And then we'll link up our prefabs. So, whoops, I put the wrong one in the wrong spot. So, assuming everything is set up exactly the way that it needs to be, we should be able to run this, and we should just have things populated here. So let's test that out. And we can see we've got the scaling of the size of the fonts there, we're going to go and tweak those. So what I'm going to do, apart from renaming this, I'm going to turn off auto size and drop it to 18. It's going to be a little bit hard for us to sort of see because of how it works. And the category picker, going to also change that to category label and turn off again the auto sizing. So if we run that, so that's a little bit better. What I could also do is adjust the tab sizing there for this. So could give it a little bit more space, and I could easily experiment with that of we make the right side maybe a little bit larger. Now these individual ones won't scale up, but we could say, okay, we will put that to 400 like we're originally going to do, and then that gives us a little bit extra to play with. So the buildable item panel, we can make these maybe 115 by 115. And our category panel, we've got that. We can make those probably, again, 15 larger. So that's good. Those are working. And if I go to unit, it changes. If I go to upgrade, so this is just automatically now working, which is good. If I click on barracks, you can see that it's starting to do the building of it, which is great. And I'm not seeing sort of much happening there in terms of the sprites and all, although all the UI images have not actually been set. So we should go and immediately do that. So I just want to link up the UI image for these, which we've got that sprite here. We'll do the same thing for the units. Link that up. And finally, the same thing for the upgrade. So now if we run it, you can see we've got our little sprite showing there, which is good. So we could experiment around with the tinting, because obviously that's not super readable. But what we could do is with this, we change that. If we put that back to white, and then the item image itself, change its tinting color, that's going to work a little better. So we'll just modify our prefab for that. So buildable item, that goes back to being bright white, and the item image will make it the dark black color. That looks better. Text, so it does always default the text to this slightly gray color, which really makes it hard to see. Not a fan of that being the default. So if we change that as well, should again find it's now a little bit easier to be reading, so that's good. We could also, because the image is overlapping with the text a little bit there, so we could tweak things a little bit further, and the item image give that a bit of a push down, so that the label is kind of sitting standalone, is something that we could do. We could also just with the label itself, bringing up the font size of that a bit, making it bold, is going to do a lot for actually helping it be visible. That looks all right. That's a little bit easier to read. And then I will do the final tweak on that, because I don't want to, this is something where we could do a lot of customization for this, but I mostly just want to focus on having it be up and running. So bottom will offset that by, let's say, by 25. And what I'll do is the buildable item panel here, the Y height, I'll make it a bit higher so the image can still be square, but it'll actually be a little bit more offset. So that looks all right. I'm going to actually go back to what I was originally thinking, and for the label, put that down the bottom. That. I think that will be the last sort of visual tweak that I need to do there. That's looking better. I needed to change also our alignment for this, so it aligns to the bottom. I'll drop the font size a little bit. There we go. That's looking good. So, okay, it can kick off a build, stuff like of that. Be nice to be able to have a bit of feedback happening though with this. And I'm going to bring an item in here so we can just sort of see with this. So what I want to do is provide some kind of indication that building is in progress, something like of that. So I'm going to, in our package manager, bring in an additional package that lets us just easily create some very basic sprites. Because actually all I need sprite-wise for this is something super, super simple. So we have our 2D sprite stuff, so that lets us go and create and edit ones, and you can also go and create sort of, you've got a few different particular ones, but I'm just going to bring in 2D sprite. And once that's brought in, that will let me just create a very simple, so I can go to create, and we'll have an option under 2D and sprites. I just want a square, so sprite, white square, like that. Because then under this, I'm going to add in a UI image, going to link it up to that. So that image is currently overlapping with the whole one here, which is good. Where it has image type here, I can change that over to filled. And you notice how fill method here is, we've got different options. And we'll notice if I change this, we get something that functions like a clock. So what I could do is I could adjust this so it takes up the full space. I can adjust the tinting of this so that it has a level of transparency, something like that. And then what we'll see is it circles around like that. Now that means that, okay, can show, we want it to go from essentially filled to clear indicates the progress. So I think having it start at the top, so we can go from 1 all the way around, that would go like that. If I flip it, then I have something that goes from 1 and ticks around like that quite nicely. So this is my, essentially this is the in progress indicator. Now I will turn off this being a raycast target. I don't want it to block any of the things behind. I'm also going to do the same on the item image here. I don't want that to be a raycast target. Maskable actually should be left on. So that's good. So our buildable item picker, I want it to now also have serialized field, Unity engine, UI image, in progress indicator, like that. So we can hook that up. So that'll be part of the prefab then in a moment. So that's connected up. Just go and overrides apply all, which that means I can delete that. So what I want to do is now be able to actually show that progress is happening. So we do already have in the builder, we had those events for showing that progress was happening. We've got our ones here for, the different stages. Now I do have these currently as a serialized field. I'm going to change those to public ones now though, because there's something where I want it to be accessible easily for anything. So what I can do is I'm going to just copy our list of ones here because we do have quite a few different things. So we've got a few different ways that we could set this up. And one option is we could do the listening for the progress on the buildable item picker itself. It needs to know the progress no matter what. The build tabbed, this could also do the listening. So we've got a few different places where we could do that listening. I think the tabbed is the one that makes the most sense for it happening in. So what I'm going to do is these are going to be linked builder, and we'll have an add listener like that. And what I need to know is, okay, stuff like it started, paused, resumed, potentially don't need all of those, but there's probably going to be a decent chance I need a lot of them. So I'm going to look and see the setup for them all just has that build data, so it makes it fairly easy for linking into them. So I'm going to do a little bit of a lazy sort of setup here where, okay, I'm going to have that. And I'll just bring everything over. These are going to be a very similar structure. Multi-line editing is honestly one of my favorite things in existence. It makes doing stuff like this significantly easier. So we have builder, base, build data. Did mess up the organization of these a little bit, but what I should find is if I select that, I can generally do cut and paste will do it, but there's also, depending on your particular editor, you can usually tell it to specifically format it. And then I can link up to all of these, but I have to go, can't really do the multi-line editing as easily with that. So have all of these connected up. So far so good, but I still need to know what object to potentially talk to, because I could have multiple things in progress. That's something I intentionally want to support. So I'm going to actually have a dictionary here, and this is going to go from our SO buildable object base to that item picker. So item picker map, item picker UI map. And when I build up the UI, I will actually populate this. So when we do the clean out, we'll do a clear. And then here, where we do all of this binding, I will add in. So we have available buildable equal to the item UI logic, because that makes it really easy for me to then here, I can go and say, okay, well, build queued shouldn't really need to do anything. Build started, there's a few different ones here where I might want to do stuff, but ticked is the main one. And what I want to be able to do is go, okay, our item UI map, item picker UI map, in build data, and we have the object being built. And then I want to be able to just go set progress. And I can ask the build data for the current build progress, because that will go from 0 to 1. So then our item picker here has a public void go for in progress, because our UI then here for our in progress indicator, well, if we go back to this, we saw that we actually had a setting here, our fill amount. So what we can do is fill amount, and it's actually going to be 1 minus in progress. Actually, I'll go for in amount, I think is a better naming for it. So, okay, that's good. We're hooking into all of those events. Everything there looks pretty solid. If we cancel a build, there's a few different things we might need to be doing there. For now, we just want to see, does this actually update properly? So let's run it. And we'll go to build a barracks. And we can see it's building around. And then it's done. So we've got our indicator showing that a build is actually happening. Now there's a few things we would need to then do for stuff like, okay, has it been paused and resumed? Actually will just work. There's nothing specific we would need to do there, but we could give a different color indication if we wanted to. Let's see what happens when we go and build multiple things though, because we should be able to, with a unit in particular, okay, building a soldier, and we can see that it's queued up multiple ones, and it just ticks around. So that works quite nicely. So that's looking pretty good. We can queue up ones, and we can test here and see, okay, well, turbines can only be built once. So if I try and queue it again, nothing happens. And absolutely nothing will happen there. So we can start to later on do things where we filter out ones from that list that are in progress. I'm also, for our in progress indicator, I'm going to put a slight green tint to it. I think will look a little better. That looks great. But at the moment, we don't have any way of detecting cancel. We're handling everything through the on-click here. So what I could do is I could add an event trigger, and I could add a new event type for pointer click. And then we can add in here, and this is going to provide this base event data. So what I would do is our item picker, I would have public void on clicked, and we're going to need to bring in, don't need that twice, using Unity engine.event systems. So we would have base event data. Call that on, actually no, I'll modify the on button selected. Should remember and follow my own rules from before. I'll comment that out for now. So base event data in pointer event data. So that's good. And what I can do is I can check and see we do have pointer event data, and we can try and bind directly to that. Our on-click here will remove, and instead we link up this, and we can go to our buildable item, pick it. Now you'll see it doesn't pick up the particular one, so we do unfortunately have to go for base event data, which is okay. Should then see it listed as a dynamic, which is good. Now this will be a pointer event data. So we'll have var pointer event data is like that. So with the data there, and this actually should be not base event data, it should be pointer event data. So then I can go if pointer event data button, if it's the left button, which is it will treat as the primary one. And I'm going to then have here also an on item cancelled. So if it was the left button, we'll invoke the on item selected. And we provide our item SO. Otherwise, if the pointer event data button is the right one, then we do cancel. So that's good. We've got that set up. It means we need to modify our logic here a little bit because we've got on item selected. That one is good. Then we need an on item cancelled. And that's going to be fairly similar. So on buildable item cancelled. Have our SO buildable object base. Then we want to be able to go linked builder. And we want to be able to go and tell it to cancel a build. And can see cancel build. We'll actually change this to a request to cancel build of that in-buildable item. So slightly different logic, because this is going to go public bool that. Now what we want to do is we want to, our builds in progress contain a few different things. So firstly, if we've got no builds in progress, it's very easy. If builds in progress count is 0, we're just going to return true. There's effectively nothing that needs to happen. Otherwise, I want to go through my builds in progress. Item index is 0. Item index is less than that. And I want to check if builds in progress item index object being built is this. Then what I will do is I will remove it. So builds in progress, remove at item index, and we return true. Otherwise we return false. Now it could be the top item currently being built. And I do actually want to allow that to go through our normal cancel build stuff here. So whereas for these, I don't actually think it should do a cancel build because it's not currently started. So I want to go and check, okay, if builds in progress, and we have first item, object being built is the buildable, then I want to just actually do a return cancel build of that particular one. So main reason for that is if it's in progress, I think we should invoke all of the extra logic here. Otherwise, all we're doing is removing it from the queue. and that's largely going to be something where its UI is getting refreshed. So I don't want to go and do a full sort of setup for that. What I will, however, do is I will, similar to what was done here, is I want to make sure this gets updated. So we'll go and say buildable item cancelled, and if it cancelled the if it did actually successfully cancel something, or if there was nothing there to cancel, it returns true. So if it returned true, then what I want to do is in buildable item, I want to set it to 0. Reason being, if it cancelled the main one that's being built, that's the one whose progress we're showing, so we should wipe that out. So let's test this out. In theory, if I right-click on something, nothing should happen. If I left-click, it'll start building. And if I right-click, we're not getting that coming through. So what I want to do is check and see what's happening with our buildable item picker here. So sometimes we do need to step in and debug things. So it should be working. So I right-click. It is coming into the code, which is good. And we can see the button is right, and we can see immediately what the issue was. I had a not equals rather than a equals. So let's fix that. And we should now be able to hopefully build something, cancel it, and that just works. So I go to build, I right click, cancels. Now we see that has not shown the progress quite correctly there. And actually what I will do is go and have a function here, clear progress. And that actually goes and sets the fill amount to 1, which that is going to be a better function, and allows us, by having it as a separate thing there, that means we could add further logic to it later if we wished. So that looks good. Test that out again. It did cancel it. This is running. Right click. Now that fill amount, we want to check and see what it's getting set to. So we can easily, in our buildable items, can see the progress indicator. So it's right. So it actually is setting it incorrectly there. So we'll set it to 0. So actually, clear progress should be setting the fill amount to 0. So we'll fix that up. Test one more time. So we can build. So we're able to build things, and if we build them, we can then cancel them. If I'm building a unit, I can have multiple things queued up, and then it'll build the soldier, and then builds the tank. I can cancel that. So we've got our UI working for being able to queue up builds, cancel them. It can adapt to whatever number of units, things like that we've got available. It'll adapt to the number of different categories, and it gives us that tabbed style of being able to build things, which is excellent. So dive on in and experiment with this, see if there's other areas you'd like to add to it. You set up some UI images that are nicer than the very placeholder ones that I've put together. But dive on in and see how you go with it. Thanks folks, hope you found the video interesting and helpful. If you have, chuck in a like and subscribe, really helps out, it's really appreciated. If you got any questions, chuck in a comment below. If you're looking for the code for the project, that is available up on GitHub. I've got a link to that in the description. You can use the code in any of your own projects, commercial and non-commercial ones. And if you've got other areas you'd like to see me talk about, mention that in the comments too. And if you're looking for other ways to support the channel, then I do have a Patreon, and there's a link to that in the description also. But until next time, bye!